loneliness is actually the biggest contributing factor to aging.
Do you see men really facing this battle of like guilt that like taking care of themselves?
Our physical appearance, whether it's makeup that someone might put on or the clothing they put on in the morning when they get, go to the office or versus, go out to work, that's how you present yourself.
There seems to be more and more data of just how destructive sugar is on the body.
And oxidative stress itself is kind of at the root cause of a lot of diseases and the aging process itself.
How in the world do you know what to do?
People who have depression are actually about 6 to 10 times more likely to develop heart disease.
All right, Dr. Goldberg, welcome to Dad Edge. It's good to have you here, my friend.
Thanks so much, Larry. It's a pleasure. Good to be here and really excited for our conversation.
Me too. I've worked with you guys, for like almost 2 decades in the OR. I've had a handful of, doctors on the show, but it's fascinating, to speak to people I used to work with, but on this channel versus, being shoulder to shoulder in the OR. So
fair. Well, yeah, you mentioned that you've had some time in the operating room, and I'm happy that you've accepted me on your show, having dealt with surgeons before. The surgeons on the whole are I don't know, they're kind of staunch people and not always the nicest to deal with. So anyways, I hope to break the mold a little bit on that one.
What's so funny about that is, yeah, sure, there's some, but it doesn't matter like what industry you're in. There's a plethora of personalities. You've got surgeons who have big egos, and you have ones who are humble. You have people who build houses with big egos, and you have ones who are humble. So, but I enjoyed my time. I was always fascinated by the OR. But what got you even interested in becoming a doctor?
Well, I guess it started with my dad, who was a vascular surgeon. He worked in Toronto for a good 40 years, and I saw surgery, and he actually brought me into the operating room while I was still an undergrad student. I don't think you could do that anymore, but I started operating at a young age, and I loved it. I went from an interest in sports medicine and orthopedics, and when I got into med school, I kind of realized that I wanted to do something a little bit more artistic and with a little bit more variation in sort of what the specialty does. And plastic surgery is a remarkable specialty. I mean, it deals from head to toe with every tissue type, and most of the procedures involve some amount of creativity or subjective judgment. So that's, I really enjoy that, and it's an amazing part of the specialty. And we also get to work with all the other surgeons. So, the plastic surgeons will help out orthopedic surgeons or general surgeons in various cases in reconstruction. So we're kind of like the surgeon's surgeon. So it's a really amazing specialty, and I really love it.
That's so cool, man. That is so cool. Can I ask you a really funny question, but also get some good information? Okay, so I've obviously been in the OR a lot, but my thing was orthopedics and then some general surgery. So I'd never saw any type of plastic surgery, even though all my time in the OR. But I've always been so fascinated how you guys look at so take somebody's face. Like I got this lovely thing just hanging right underneath my chin, right? And it's getting bigger as I get older. And the thing that always fascinates me is I'm like, how in the world does a surgeon know, okay, if we're going to make this tight, this thing under your chin and make everything blend, it looks like you never even had a thing. How in the world do you know what to do? And then the other thing too, is it's so deceiving in a way. I do remember seeing a couple people in recovery and, facelifts and stuff, but I never saw the procedures, and the surgeon would be like, oh, she is going to be perfect when she's done. And I'm like, she looks like she's been hit with a bat. How in the world do you know that? So I'm just curious, how do y'all know what it is that you're looking at and what to do? I mean, I know you're trained in it, but.
Well, honestly, the training teaches you techniques and principles. You learn how to handle tissue and the principles of what you're going to be doing in surgery. But the actual surgery itself, it really is subjective. It requires an artistic eye and judgment. You're sort of really blending science and art, and that comes with practice. And so when you start practice as a plastic surgeon, you kind of build up from where you start and do more and more complicated things as you become more and more comfortable. But knowing how much to do or the right strategy to approach an issue, that takes experience. It's not there from day one, that's for sure. And the confidence to know that when you finish with somebody that it's going to turn out well eventually, that once it's healed, that's confidence, and that only comes when you've done it enough times and you've seen those patients for recovery, and you're like, what, that turned out well, or I could probably do a little bit better here. But that's why they call it practice. It's every day getting better. You always learn from what you do, and it's a lifetime process.
Yeah, and it is fascinating. I mean, surgery has always fascinated me because you're right. You're taking science and techniques, right? But you're also there's an art to it, right? I mean, to be able to use, I guess, both sides of your brain to be analytical and artistic. I mean, it's quite a combination.
Well, I used to, before I got into medical school, I used to do quite a bit of art. I used to sculpt, I'd carve wood, and I painted. And med school, you don't really have so much time to do that. I also used to play violin. My mom was a violin teacher, and that was another thing. I hit med school, and I kind of had to put those things away because I had to
Yeah.
focus on learning. When I started practice, I was in conversation with a patient one day, and she asked me, so do you do art? And I said, well, actually, I don't. I used to do this and that, and then I didn't really have time anymore. And she looked at me, she said, what do you mean you don't do art? I mean, you do art every day. This is what, and I realized, I'd taken my skills and that, kind of right brain thinking and translated it into my profession. So really, I mean, what I do does involve art, and plastic surgery requires that, two-sided brain activity.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Plastic surgery. I mean, I know there's probably a lot of stereotypes out there, of like, oh, people they're just vain, they're this, they're that, but I mean, you know, plastic surgery will change someone's life, and it will change their confidence. It will change their outlook on the world, how they operate, how they function. Um, I'm sure you've seen that in your practice a ton.
Absolutely, and that the concept of vanity. I really like to debunk the idea because I don't like that as a word. There's not a lot of words in the English language that have a definition and a judgment at the same time.
Oh
And
yeah.
vanity is unique. I mean, it's a negative. It's bad, and I don't like that. As animals, all animals judge each other on how they appear. That's how you choose a mate. That's how you interact socially. Our physical appearance, whether it's makeup that someone might put on or the clothing they put on in the morning when they go to the office, or versus go out to work, that's how you present yourself. So to me, the concept of vanity is flawed. I think that the way people appear is very important. That's what we do every day and how we choose to interact with others. So and I've seen a lot of those transformations, and I took it for granted. I think at the start of my practice, I didn't really recognize the power that had, but I saw those changes, and I saw the changes that it made in people's lives, and it's so gratifying. To take somebody from not feeling confident in themselves and not being confident in dating or being in a work environment, and then see them afterwards and a whole new face. I mean, the smile, the glow that they come in with, it's so gratifying. I love that, and it really is what drives me in the work that I do.
That's awesome, man. It's one thing to, like working with surgeons as long as I had, you knew the guys that were there because they cared, and the result and the heart that was behind it. And then, you had some surgeons that were just quite frankly really transactional, but that's in every profession, no matter
Yeah.
what it is. But it's great to know that that's your approach to this. You have your own health journey that you went on about 13 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was between 2010 and 2012. I realized, back in my old life, I was very unhealthy. Through residency, through the start of my practice, I stopped paying attention to myself, and it really became just about self-sacrifice and sleeping less and working more and eating whatever food I could find. And I realized that I was unhealthy and not happy about it. And so as patients would come into my office, and I was trying to counsel them on preparing for procedures and getting ready for surgery, and I was trying to tell them how to be healthy, and I was thinking to myself, what kind of a hypocrite am I? Like, how can I tell someone to be healthy when I'm not doing it myself? And that was a pivot for me. So 2010, I changed what I did. I started changing my diet. I went keto for a while, although that's changed since. I don't think that's good for a long term, but it certainly helped me shed some weight. I took off 50 pounds, and I was going to the gym, and I turned around my life. I changed my lifestyle. And at the same time, a part of that was surgical. I got to the end of my weight loss, and I realized that I still had some tissue on my chest. What's called gynecomastia, and that excess male breast tissue, which it's not normal, but lots of guys have it. I realized that I was never going to get rid of it. I looked back and I realized as a teenager I had that as well, and so I went to one of my colleagues and I ended up having surgery in 2012 to remove that gynecomastia tissue. And I also had a little bit of liposuction around my midsection, another super common problem for guys. And that was like the icing on the cake for me. I was really proud of myself to have achieved this end result of 2 years of effort and really changing myself. And then to get there and sort of see these things left over, it really, I didn't feel like I had finished my journey. At the end of that surgery, after I healed, it really pushed me that much more, to the gym even more often, and it was a life-changing event for me. So and it was so good to be on the other side of the knife. It's, as a surgeon, it's easy to fall into the trap of you're just doing things to people and you don't really think of them as people anymore. They're just sort of coming through on your table. To really experience what it was like to recover from surgery and the change that it made for me and the anxieties around that, I feel like it made me a much better surgeon. It definitely made me more able to appreciate my patients and the journey they're going through, and feel that much better about the benefit I was providing to them, because I felt it myself, and so yeah, that was a really pivotal time for me, and I really appreciated the experience.
It's really fascinating you say that, because I think no matter what we're doing for a living, if we have been in the shoes of the people that we're serving, I think we just serve them better, because we know firsthand what it is that they're going through, their emotions behind it, their mentality behind it, the things that, quite frankly, they might have not done in life because of whatever it is that they're going through. But yeah, I definitely hear you, man. It's so cool that you were able to learn, a few things through that experience.
Yeah, and and I'm also I really appreciate sharing it. I like telling people that I've done this. When people come to my office, especially guys, I'm very open to sharing that with them, because for guys, we're taught from a young age you're not supposed to think about this kind of stuff. It's almost like a faux pas. Like, guys are not. You're not supposed to think. You're not supposed to think about that, and you're supposed to be perfect the way you are, and you can work through anything. And I don't know. There's this mentality among guys that it's not okay to talk about these things, and it's something to hide under a shirt. And I really like to help guys feel comfortable with the fact that this is normal, and seeking care for it to make yourself feel better is also okay. There's nothing bad about that. Guys need to take care of themselves too.
I agree, man. In fact, you mentioned self-sacrifice when you were in medical school, and you and I were talking about Washington University is like literally in my backyard here, and it's a wildly popular medical school here in St. Louis. And I remember anytime I was at Washington University Hospital, doing procedures, I was always working with the residents and fellows and all that good stuff. And I would just see these guys just spent the majority of the time, pulling 12, 15-hour days easy, barely any sleep at night, exactly the life that you're talking about, which is, just finding something to eat when you can, between patients and all this, and learning in school and tests. And it's a lot. And when it comes to self-sacrifice, there's a lot of guys out there that, we throw ourselves on that sacrificial sword. We don't take care of ourselves. And even if we want to, there's guilt there, I think. And I'm sure, I know you mentioned before we hit record that 20% of your practice is made up of men, but do you see men really facing this battle of guilt, taking care of themselves?
Oh, absolutely. That guilt, it's almost like a shame. It's similar to the concept of vanity. It's like you shouldn't look after yourself. Who are you? You're supposed to be sacrificing yourself for other people. But on an airplane, the first thing they say to you is, when those oxygen masks drop, you put yours on first, because you can't help other people until you're safe and you're okay. So, it's important to take care of yourself so that your mental and physical health are at their peak. And that's the way that you can give the most to your family, your friends, your community. If you're unwell in any of those dimensions, how can you possibly be a good father or a good human if you're not healthy yourself? And so I see guys who come through my doors, and they've been plagued and years often, that they've thought about things and avoided it because they just didn't feel comfortable talking. So So it's in the past 10 years, I'd say a huge change. I would say my male population has probably doubled compared to what it was a decade ago. And I think that's because there's a shift, there's a change. It's more acceptable for guys to talk about this and think about it. But it's going in the right direction, and it's important that we all talk about it openly and say it's okay to take care of how you look. It's okay to take care of yourself. Life is not just about self-sacrifice. Life is about helping people, but you have to help yourself first. I'm a huge fan of RuPaul Drag Race. So RuPaul at the end of every show, I know you never suspect it.
RuPaul.
So RuPaul at the end of every episode, one of the things she says is, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? And I think it's a very, very true statement. You need to love yourself first, and it's okay. It's not just okay. Actually, it's important that you do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the more fulfilled I think we are, the more we can fulfill. We can pour into others. I mean, we've been saying that for almost a decade on the podcast. I really want to talk about oxidative stress. I know that's one of the big topics that you talk about, and it's one of those things. It's like the canary in the coal mine. We take on a ton of stress as men. Some of us physical, some of us mental and emotional, some all three. But what does stress do to the body, even to the mind, just over time, if not addressed?
Yeah, so I think you already separated a few different types of stress. So there's mental emotional stress, there's physical stress, and then there's chemical stress. And oxidative stress falls into the chemical stress part of things. But physical stress causes oxidative stress, emotional and mental stress the same. Having emotional and mental stress is a huge contributing factor to harm in your body. The trickle down effect on all of your cells and the function and the organ systems is massive. And so a good mental state is really, really important. And oxidative stress itself is kind of at the root cause of a lot of diseases and the aging process itself. And the oxidative stress, what that is it relates to oxygen radicals. So oxygen, of course, is hugely important for life. It's how we develop energy. When you work out, your muscles are consuming oxygen. But oxygen is a bit of a double-edged sword because when there's oxygen around, it's actually really harmful as well. Those oxygen molecules can take on an extra charge and become negative, and those negatively charged oxygen, that's called an oxygen-free radical, that actually directly harms your DNA, your protein in your muscle, and it's actually a source of direct harm to all of you. So the oxygen, when it first developed in our atmosphere 2.5 billion years or so ago, actually almost ended life on the planet. It was almost an extinction level event because there wasn't any oxygen on Earth prior to that until plants started to produce it. So we needed to develop a way to manage this because actually it harms us. So almost every disease process, whether it's heart disease, heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, neurodegenerative disorders, all of it at a root cause level is related to this oxidative stress thing. And your mental and emotional stress as well as physical stressors contribute to that. So it's super important to be on top of all the different types of stress in your body.
Can I get a little nerdy?
Yeah, please. I love it.
Me too. I mean, my background is in sports medicine, and so I just love this type of stuff. So I think you mentioned in there that this has an impact on our DNA.
Yes. Yeah.
So how? Like, I guess and feel free to get all scientific. I would just love to hear what exactly is happening.
You got it. So oxygen, as it passes through our cells, we breathe it in. It gets taken up by our various cells, and our mitochondria, which are these little organelles inside the cells, they use this oxygen to produce energy. The unit of energy, the currency of energy in our body is ATP. And that's we generate that stuff. That's how our muscles contract. That's how our brain works. So these oxygen molecules kind of get processed through that. And the normal oxygen molecule is very useful for us. The oxygen-free radical, this oxygen molecule that has has a negative charge on it. That's what oxidative stress is. When there's oxidative stress, there's this sort of buildup of these byproducts, or think of it, think of the mitochondria in your cells being like power plants. When you look at a power plant, there's smokestacks, right? There's waste products coming out of production of energy. That's what oxidative stress is. Oxidative stress is that excess, that pollution. And what it causes is these oxygen molecules to become negatively charged. And that does a lot of different things. But one of them is that it directly harms our DNA. So our DNA, one of these oxygen molecules can easily knock a pair, base pair out of that. And our DNA is very good at repairing itself. So there's constantly this damage and repair process going on. But at any given moment in our body, there's 10 cancer cells. So, I mean, right now, you and I are sitting here with 10 cancer cells in our body. And our immune system is really good about finding them and getting rid of them. But this oxidative stress is a process that's continuously there, and it's constantly causing more of these cancer cells to form. And we're constantly mopping them up. And when we add oxidative stress, and we can do that with any number of different things. I mean, smoking, alcohol, processed foods, sugar intake, sun exposure is a huge one for the skin. All of those things just add to the oxidative stress that we already have just from our own normal chemistry, our own normal function. So knowing that we have this, trying to manage it and minimize it is super important, because it leads to DNA damage, which is a source of cancer, and it leads to damage of our cells and misfunction, which then trickles down to aging. I mean, that's what the aging process is. It is a gradual degradation of our cells, and at the root cause, at the very top of that river, the very source of it, that's oxidative stress that's causing that.
Wow. So when it comes, the thing that I'm really picturing here is, so these oxidative, or these negatively charged, are they molecules?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
They're like these soldiers that are constantly trying to attack us, is really what it is, right?
Yep, you got it. And we're adding to that army, I mean, continuously, just by existing. And lots of behaviors that we're doing are adding to it as well. And there's a lot of things that we can do to minimize that. I mean, certainly avoiding those kinds of behaviors like smoking, drinking, are important. Minimizing the processed food that we take in and the sugar intake. Exercise is a great way of helping to moderate oxidative stress. Exercise itself actually temporarily increases oxidative stress, but it's a positive thing. There's an effect called hormesis. And hormesis is this mechanism. It's like, the expression, that which doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. This is a good example of that. Hormesis is the idea that you stress your body to a low-level extent, exercise being a great example of that. It causes some oxidative stress, and it forces your body to adapt to it and develop more mechanisms to help and manage that oxidative stress. So the more you do that, the more your body is in tune and able to manage it as it happens. So you can minimize the creation of these negatively charged oxygen molecules, these oxygen-free radicals, by changing your inputs and managing sun exposure and such. But exercise is a great way of getting your body to mop up more of these and be more efficient at managing that.
That makes total sense. There's got to be a fine line, though, between maybe too much exercise and when I'm talking about extreme. I mean, I train every day. I get 12 to 15,000 steps in a day, weight training and all that good stuff. But I've noticed, and I don't know if there's a correlation, but I would love for you to expand upon it. People that seem to exercise a ton, and I'm talking like these people that do marathons all the time or ultras and that kind of thing, you just kind of notice, and I don't want to stereotype everybody, but these people that just huge long durations of, especially maybe even cardiovascular exercise, they seem like they look older. Is there a fine line in like a negative impact?
Yeah, that's. Okay. I think you hit the nail on the head, Larry. You're absolutely right. There is a line, and going past that, the act of exercising actually starts to catabolize. It starts to break down your body, and so when you go past that edge and go to the extreme, you can cause more harm than good, and there are parts of your body that you're going to wear down. So there's a balance to be had. Needless to say, those are the exceptions. I mean, that's the extreme people. For the rest of North America, for the most part, people are way on the other side of that extreme and need to up their exercise. But yeah, going too far in either direction is certainly not good for you.
Yeah. And so someone comes in, and if you're going to treat it, so if you're looking at a patient, they have a ton of stress in their life and they're looking for wellness, they're looking for optimal health, they're looking for longevity. And I know every individual is totally different, but usually what are the paths that that individual you would recommend taking?
So, I guess there are four key pillars to healthy longevity, and then there are, therapeutics and things that you can add on top of that. And key pillars are what you might imagine. So, diet is a huge one. And in terms of diet, I generally recommend a whole food plant-based diet as much as possible. Especially for guys, the discussion around meat becomes a challenge because for guys, it's all about the barbecue, it's all about the carnivore kind of. And that caveman carnivore mentality is really very harmful. We do not get enough fiber. We do not get enough plants. Plants contain phytochemicals, these chemicals that actually fight cancer and do a whole bunch of really good things for our bodies. By having a meat-forward diet, you're missing out on all that and actually causing harm. There's some amino acids, the building blocks of animal proteins, that are actually really harmful. So from a diet point of view, that's number one. I'd say whole food plant forward diet. Doesn't have to be purely vegan or anything that extreme, but that's the first thing I recommend. Second one, exercise. Super important to maximize your cardiovascular fitness. Make sure you're able to go up those stairs. Keep your heart and lungs healthy, and strength training at the same time. Can't miss out on that because muscle mass is directly related to brain function and long-term cognition. So if you want to keep your brain functioning well as you age, you're going to want to make sure to keep up your muscle mass. Your muscles actually secrete over 30 hormones. So it's an endocrine organ. It's a hormone organ. It's not just about movement. So diet number one, exercise number two, sleep. Sleep is number three, and oftentimes people are not getting a healthy amount of sleep. Really important to get a good healthy night's sleep. Missing out on that is immensely stressful on the body. And the fourth thing, which most people miss out on, especially guys, it is about social connectivity. It is about resilience in your own mind and connection with other people. And there is actually a whole slew of science and actual proof that lack of connection to people, loneliness, is actually the biggest contributing factor to aging and disease processes. The people who have depression are actually about 6 to 10 times more likely to develop heart disease. When people are put into an old age or retirement home, and they're isolated in that environment as compared to living at home or with family, they will actually die on average 6 years earlier than the same person who is living out in the community. So small things like that. And as guys, there's this, you're tough. You could do this on your own. You're an island. So important to have connection with friends, family, people around you. And so people. The advice I give is love more. Be open and be grateful for the people around you. Make sure you tell them every day, because that is the pillar of longevity that I think most people miss out on the most. So those are kind of the four: diet, exercise, sleep, connectivity, and social interactions. And then the fifth thing is supplements and things that you can add to that. And there's so much. I mean, that's a whole topic to itself. There is one supplement that I'm a huge fan of that I really love, and I have no financial interest in this company, but I think it's an amazing product. I've been using it for 15 years. It is something called Glycodin, Glisodin, Glycodin. And this Glycodin actually relates to that oxidative stress topic we were just talking about, because there's an enzyme, there's this function that we have in our body that fights oxidative stress, and that's it. There's an enzyme, and this supplement Glycodin actually is the only product worldwide that I know of that actually can give you more of this, by mouth. It's a capsule. You take this stuff, and so it ups your oxidative stress management ability immensely. And there's like 20 years of data on this stuff. So I get all my patients started on that around surgery to make sure they have good recoveries. I've been taking it for 15 years. I think it's the most magical stuff on the planet. So when people ask me what's your best advice for longevity, that's it. 4 pillars. Take that Glycodin stuff.
Oh my gosh, that is gold. We talk about the diet for a minute. I mean, so there's all these experts on Instagram saying that if I eat 5 steaks a day, that's my optimal diet.
Well, it's I guess the first thing is that, as you said, there's no one thing that fits everyone. There is variation, and so it's not right to say this is the one right answer. When it comes to diet, though, I think the issue that most guys face is much too high of a dependence on animal proteins. The thing about it is that when weight is your primary objective, if you're looking to hit a number, going keto, going high protein, absolutely will help you hit that number. But it's not it's not necessarily the right measure of health. People look at the scale as the principal, outcome, but the reason they're looking at that is because that's the only thing they know about themselves. If you were driving a car and you only had one piece of information on your dashboard, you would look at that one piece of information. If that's your RPMs, you're going to check out your RPM because that's all you know. So if all you have is a scale, all you're going to look at is what your weight is. But there are so many other much more important dimensions of health. Your VO2 max, the function of your heart and your lungs, your lean body weight, your fat percentage. Those kinds of things are super important. People tend to neglect that. And of course, there's the internal measures. So the people who are eating all the steaks and have, follow the caveman carnivore diet and say, we evolved like this, they're missing the boat, in my opinion, because they're failing to ingest so many important nutrients that they need from plants, mushrooms. There are substances that are only produced in mushrooms that we desperately need in our body. And it's super important to include that in your diet. For those who, talk about caveman diet and this is how we evolved, they're looking, it's only been a few 100,000 years that hominids have been on the planet. Primates, maybe a few million years. Our evolution started 3.5 billion years ago. I mean, we still depend, we share a whole bunch of biochemical processes with single-celled organisms and plants across the planet. The enzyme I referenced in that glycidin stuff is one of those. That actually evolved around 2.8 billion years ago, and pretty much every living thing on the planet makes that. So you can't discount and ignore 3.5 billion years of evolution and everything we gained through that and just look at the past few 100,000 years and say, well, this is what we ate. We ate what we could through 3.5 billion years, whatever was available to us, and we evolved to be able to do that. Today we have a choice. We can choose to eat things that are the best for us. We don't just eat what's available. And aren't we lucky to be in that state? But you got to think through what you're eating and apply good principles and make sure you're getting a healthy, well-balanced diet. And my personal viewpoint and a lot of years of knowledge around that and a physiology background, I can tell you the caveman carnivore protein forward diet is not the right thing to do. There's a lot of harm that comes from that.
Yeah, I read. Obviously, I love anything nutrition. Like I'm just a geek when it comes to like the exercise science and nutrition and all that. And I think when I actually had I ate animal protein at every meal like about 5 years ago. Had some blood work done and it was not good. Like my kidneys weren't working the best. They weren't dysfunctioning, but they weren't optimal. My estradiol was high, even though my body fat was pretty low. My testosterone was fine. It was like 600 and something, I don't know. But I switched over to, I actually, for a handful of years, I went straight plant-based. I wouldn't say vegan, but mostly plant-based. And I hired this coach to help me with it so I could get like creative with my meals and that kind of thing. And I told this coach, I was like, I'll give this 30, because I wanted my blood work to be better. I want to be healthier. And I just told him, I was like, I'll give this 30 days, but I hope this fails because I don't want to eat like this. And after a while, I was like, this is actually pretty good. And I actually got very used to like super healthy food. I actually looked forward to it. Like I didn't really have any cravings for bad food anymore. And I cut the animal protein down almost completely out. And then I think it was 3 or 6 months later, I went and got my blood work done. I was like, all right, we'll see what happens. Sure enough, man, estradiol was cut in half. And so it was well within the normal range. My testosterone went up. Body fat went down. Lean muscle mass went up. I was like, holy cow, this actually does work. And as far as like my diet now, I would say I'm probably 65, 35, plant-based. And I do eat some animal protein, but it's not, it's about 35% of the time. But I've noticed that blood work wise and just how I feel and it seems pretty optimal, but it's been a bit of a journey. But yeah, I look at the typical American diet, especially with all the confusion that's out there right now, with everybody promoting, all these different diets. And I'm just like, I don't know, it seems like a very triggering topic. And I'm sure when people come in, they have do most patients, do they have their mind made up about what they're eating and why they're eating it?
To some extent, yeah. And it's funny because when I ask people, and I ask them now, where I didn't before, and before to me is 7 years. The past 7 years, my health journey and that weight loss was 10, 12 years ago. But over that, for the few years after that, I sort of switched to more vegetarianish. I was strict vegan for probably 5 years, and now I call myself plant-based. And much like yourself, I balance. I do put in some animal protein, but it's a minimal. I would say my calories are 95% plant, 5% animal, and I think that's kind of the right sort of a balance, just to think about it that way. But 7 years ago, when I made that transition to being plant-based, I started asking my patients and having the conversation. And it's funny because almost everybody answered me the same way. When I asked them, what kind of diet do you follow? They would say, well, I follow a healthy diet. And I say, okay, good to know. What does that mean to you? Like, what is healthy? And the range of what people think is healthy is really remarkable. And it's, as you said, there's a lot of noise out there, and it's easy to get lost in that. And of course, everyone who talks to you about diet, it is almost like a religious thing. It's part of their identity, and they speak about it with such passion that you like, wow, I got to believe this person. They're so passionate about what they're talking about. But that's not science, and that doesn't get you where you need to be. And so there's not a one right answer as far as what everybody should be eating. You got to follow principles, but those principles need to include making sure that you keep up your fiber, which comes from plants. It doesn't come from animals. You got to keep up your protein, but if you do it just with animal protein, you're causing harm to your body. So you got to get plant proteins in there. Get mushrooms in there. Get the beans, lentils, nuts. There are so many plant sources. Hemp is a great source of protein. It's got lots of branched chain amino acids. Those are the things that we need when we do bodybuilding. When I do strength training, I usually throw a scoop of hemp in my smoothie in the morning. So I always like to get a little extra in that way. So you got to keep up your protein. But the premise is that you need to follow principles, and those principles need to have things in moderation, and eating a whole foods diet and avoiding processed foods, avoiding sugars. I think that's a universal. And for the most common North American diet, trying to limit animal protein intake, I think is super important, because for the most part, we take in way too much, almost all of us. So those are kind of principles I would recommend following. When I started asking my patients and I became aware of what they were eating, I started also paying more attention in the operating room. And as a surgeon, there's a lot of gifts that I get, things that I learned from my patients, but that was one of them. When I started paying attention, I recognized that my patients who were either vegetarian, vegan, plant-based, their tissue was way healthier. I mean, it holds sutures better. It bleeds less. It's less friable. It's less fragile. The planes of dissection where you're supposed to go to kind of get to the structures, they open much more easily. So the quality of the tissue is actually better. And when I started to realize that, I thought, no, I'm just imagining it. Surgeons often operate on people who just bleed a lot and their tissue is not good quality. And in surgery, there's this term. It's called poor protoplasm. If someone just isn't healthy and they're bleeding a lot, oh man, that guy's got poor protoplasm. But it's not. It's not a genetic. It's not an inherent thing. These are behavioral. You could change that, and that recognition that truly what you eat, it physically impacts your tissue and your body. That was a really important revelation for me, and certainly a part of why I have such a interest in the space and healthy longevity, because I see physically what this does to the insides of people.
Wow. I have never heard that. This is why I love the podcast, get to learn something new every day. What about sugar? There's obviously all kinds of things about sugar, but it seems like the longer time goes on, there seems to be more and more data of just how destructive sugar is on the body.
Yeah.
So,
that's it, 100%. And as time passes, more and more information on the harms that it causes, and it's not like a little bit is okay, and kind of similar to alcohol. We used to say, well, there's a safe limit. Truly, there's not. Any amount of alcohol, any amount of sugar, it's harming you. And the sugar, if you think about the sort of the human body as you're either building or you're repairing. Building is when you're in a time of plenty. Historically, again, going back 3.5 billion years, our ancient ancestors and how we evolved, there were periods of time where there were no resources. There was no food to eat. There was very little around, and we needed to hunker down, survive, and repair ourselves. Repair DNA, keep the organism maintaining itself so that it could make it through to a point where there were resources around. Food, sugar is kind of like that. When you take in sugar or animal protein for that matter, the mechanism of the two is very similar. It's basically triggering your body and saying, okay, we are in a time of abundance. It is time to build. And building, creating new muscle, creating new fat, it comes at an expense. And that expense is harm to your DNA, the epigenetics, which is the folding of your DNA. So the act of engaging that building mechanism continuously with the stimulation from sugar is immensely harmful, and among other things, it increases our oxidative stress, which is one of the mechanisms through which it causes harm. So if you think of all the good things in your body that can repair you and keep you alive longer, when you're eating that bit of chocolate or whatever that sugar-filled drink or your cup of coffee that has a couple squirts from from your favorite coffee shop, put in those extra vanilla squirts. As a resident, I can tell you those peppermint mocha hot chocolate, those killed me. I mean, that was a huge source of my weight gain, and I didn't realize it was poison. I mean, as you do that, among other things, it's going to increase the calcifications and plaques in your arteries. So, one of the effect that has is it shifts the balance of oxidative stress in your body, and that's a huge reason that the cholesterol and the apoproteins, the thing that carries the cholesterol, it actually embeds itself in the arterial walls and starts to form plaques, and that's the start of heart disease. And you and I were around the same time in our lives. We started having this 30, 40 years ago. I mean, it's building up when you take in those sugars, those animal proteins, it's adding to that. And one of the mechanisms that's happening through is actually oxidative stress. So, I mean, it's imperative from day one. Longevity and healthy longevity is something that we need to practice from the time that we're children, onwards. There's no right time to start. The time to start is today. If yesterday was the best day, today is the second best day.
I love that. Yeah, there's all kinds of obviously research about how destructive sugar actually is, and also what about the artificial ones? I mean, and there's high fructose corn syrup, but what about these other ones too that like the sugar alcohols and that kind of thing? Does that have a negative impact on us too?
Yeah, so the fructose, the high concentration fructose stuff, that is terrible. That is poison. I mean, literally, it is like eating poison. And so many foods in North America have that. So you really got to be mindful of that, because that fructose is actually more harmful than glucose is. So yeah, definitely want to limit that. The sugar substitutes. They don't harm you the same way, but there are different harms that come from that. And among them are the harms that it causes to the microbiome in your intestine. So sugars aren't good for that, but the sugar replacements and substitutes, they're even more harmful. So the bacteria in your intestine are actually very directly related to your brain function and your skin as well. There's this triad: the brain, the gut, and the skin gut brain axis, and these three organs and the bacteria in your intestine and your skin, all of those things relate together. And so the sugar substitutes are actually really harmful to the bacteria in your intestine. So the bacteria in your intestine, I often say it's kind of comparable to having pets. Bacteria, there's wild kind and there's domestic kind. You don't want the wild kind. Those are the kinds that cause infections and bad stuff. The domesticated kind are really healthy and you need them. And in fact, many of the things that you do in your body depend on them. There's about 40 trillion bacteria in your intestine as compared to about 3.5 or 4 trillion cells in your body. So they actually outnumber you 10 to 1. And they produce a lot of stuff that have to do with your health and mental status. So your gut microbiome has been linked to depression, seizure disorder. It's related to all sorts of skin disorders, including psoriasis and skin cancer. And so people often don't really think about the importance of what's in their stomach. they eat things based on how it tastes or what they think is good for their muscle building or whatever. But you got to think about what are the bacteria in your intestine need, and for the most part, what they need is fiber. And eating things that like those sugar substitutes are really harmful for those bacteria. So start treating the bacteria in your intestines like pets. You got to look after them and make sure that they're healthy, because if they're healthy, they're going to take care of you too.
That makes total sense. What about fruit? I mean, so like I love berries. Like I'll eat blueberries, strawberries. Like I love their superfoods and all that. But I think a lot of people will lump fruit into the same category as like table sugar or high fructose corn syrup or something like that. But can you talk about that a little bit as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to separate those things. So the high concentration fructose and fruits are not comparable at all. So of course fruits do contain sugars, but the amount of sugar is actually relatively low, and it's mixed in with a bunch of water, fiber, and a whole bunch of other phytochemicals, chemicals that are actually really healthy and good for you. And so you need to take that in as a whole. If you're drinking fruit juice, that's not so good for you. And if you're drinking that high concentration fructose, that's not good for you, because you're missing out on a lot of the health benefits of the fiber and the other things that are in it. So if you're eating whole fruits, that is a very healthy thing to do. And of course, it needs to be part of a bigger whole with vegetables and appropriate proteins put in. But fruit is not an unhealthy thing to take in at all. It's great for you. And a variety of colors. When people kind of ask me what's a good guideline of how, what sort of fruits and vegetables to take in, I suggest colors. The more different colors you take in, the better off you're going to be. Red is a particularly good one. Red is a bit of an indicator in a plant that it's under some duress. And plants that are grown under duress actually produce a lot of really good things in them that are good for you and help you manage your stress. So it's a funny thing, plants grown in stressful environments. This plays out in wine. Not that I'm encouraging taking wine. Some grapes grow better in a stressed situation and actually produce different things. You can make all sorts of wines and such from that. But to the fruit idea, lots of different colors. Strawberries are particularly good. They contain something called fisetin, 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 and that's actually really good at getting rid of these zombie cells in your skin. It's another one of those processes of aging. So that's something you need to manage as well. So I encourage strawberries among other things. But the answer to your question, ultimately, fruit is good for you. But you got to eat the whole fruit. You can't just take out the parts that taste good.
I agree with you on that. I want to ask you something that is probably way below your pay grade, but I think it'd be really valuable for the audience. A lot of people are just completely freaked out now to eat fruits and vegetables because they think they're going to get cancer from all the stuff that's on them, like the pesticides and that kind of thing. And my family and I, we went a year and a half ago to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. We took the family to Hawaii, and we had never been there. And while we were there, I have never had fruit taste so good in my life. Like I was like, the fruit here is different than at home. And like last night, like we got a 10 pack of apples, and I looked at them and I was like, this thing looks like there's wax on it. So like I did this whole thing where I've been researching lately on how to actually wash fruit very effectively, but I'm still confused by it. So like if we have fruit, is there an ideal way to make sure we are completely or trying to rid ourselves of the pesticides and stuff that's on this fruit that is still safe for us to ingest?
The honest answer, Larry, is there's no way.
Really?
You cannot. And the reason is simple. Some of these pesticides actually absorb into the fruit. Grapes are particularly bad at that. No matter how you wash a grape, grapes absorb a lot of pesticides, and it requires a lot of pesticides to grow them, because they're really susceptible to insects and fungus. So the ultimate thing that you can do, one, make sure you're washing them really well. Get off what you can before you eat it. Another is, if you're able to, get organic. While there's lots of mumbo jumbo and some organic is not not real, ultimately what you're getting is usually something that's grown in a better quality. So if you have access to it, I generally recommend that. And honestly, it comes down to taste for me. As you pointed out, fruit for the most part in North America, what we're getting is, processed. It's been transported from a long distance. It's not properly ripened. It's been covered in whatever, and it just doesn't taste like fruit anymore. So you're missing out on a lot of the nutrients, because the flavor, the taste of what you're getting is coming from the nutrients that are in it. So wash things properly, and if you can, try and get organic, because it generally is a better quality of fruit or vegetable.
Do you need to buy like something certified organic, or is there different, I guess, levels or tiers of organic?
Yeah, there are a few different organizations that validate, but all of them are regulatory bodies of some kind. And I can't say that I know them intimately well to say what is good or not. But generally speaking, you're going to want to see on a label, if you're picking up something organic, that it says certified by, to make sure that where it's being grown has been properly assessed, and you're actually getting something that's been grown in a special way, which of course includes minimizing the pesticides and stuff being put on there.
Yeah, it's tricky out there when it comes to even eating healthy. What about I mean, vegetables, same thing, right? We
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
probably
same
buy
thing.
organic. Yeah.
Honestly, Larry, the bigger issue I think is above that. I mean, it's a regulatory issue, and the government in Canada and the United States both are guilty of this. There's definitely been a trend towards normalizing practices in agriculture that maximize productivity, and volume, and caloric production, but as a consequence, they compromise the quality of what's being produced. And I think that there is an onus on our governments to regulate the industry more, to make sure that proper practices are being followed, and that we're healthy. And that comes along with food security. So, balancing quantity and food security with quality of what's being produced and given to the public. And frankly, our food sources are contaminated. I mean, the pesticides, the chemicals that are in the ground, the microplastics in everything that we eat, literally everything. So it's not. It's easy to sort of take on a very negative kind of feeling about that. The reality is that we're at a turning point in human civilization, and this turning point most certainly is going to need to include a change of our food source. The food chain is contaminated, and it needs to be addressed, and that comes from government. So it's really important that government addresses that, and that'll be the way that we can say that our fruits and vegetables are actually healthy for us, and not just being produced en masse.
Yeah, I would. I'm hoping with Trump being in office and Robert Kennedy Jr. behind this, I'm hopeful that change will be made, because yeah, I think it's such an epidemic. It's such a problem. I want to talk about one other thing too, because you said glycosin, correct?
Glycodin,
Glycodin. Okay.
Glycodin, glycodin.
Okay, so I want to make sure we have that in the show notes for the guys. But I am very curious I've been reading a lot about collagen, and skin and joint health and all these different things. Should we be incorporating collagen into our diet?
So the short answer to that is no. And the reality is that collagen is a protein, and when we eat food, whether it's plant or animal based, we don't absorb whole proteins. Proteins are really big, and proteins are made up of these building blocks called amino acids. So those amino acids in different sequences make up every protein in our body. There's 20 of them, and that's it. So when you eat a protein, it's got hundreds, even thousands of amino acids. You don't have a mechanism to absorb something so large. So what you do in your stomach, your acid cleaves that, it breaks it down into either individual amino acids or groups of 2 to 10, let's say, small chains. That's what gets absorbed in your stomach and your intestine. That's what makes it into your body, and that's your building blocks. That's what goes creates collagen and muscle. However, by eating collagen, it doesn't put more collagen into places that you need it. It's not like by eating collagen that gets delivered to your joints or gets delivered to your skin. So vitamin E is a building block. It's an important component of collagen. So a lot of people talk about vitamin E for scars and for skin. And honestly, it doesn't do anything either. And it's simply, it doesn't get into the cells. It doesn't make more collagen. So the concept from a common sense point of view makes a lot of great sense, but mechanistically it doesn't work and the science isn't there. So I can't say that I encourage taking in collagen. If you eat a balanced diet and you make sure you get lots of good protein in your diet, you're most certainly getting all the building blocks that you need for collagen. And this, that glycodin stuff. One of the things about it that's very unique. So that core enzyme I mentioned, that functional thing that helps us manage our oxidative stress. That's a protein. So enzymes are proteins that have a function. So this enzyme, it's called SOD, and SOD, that's the thing that evolved 2.5 billion years ago or so. That enzyme, if you eat it, would normally get digested and you wouldn't absorb it. It would have no function. The glycodin, the thing about it that makes it really unique is that it is actually encapsulated in another bigger, tougher protein called gliadin that actually prevents it from getting digested, and that's how you absorb it. So this glycodin stuff, it actually is a way of getting a whole protein into your body, and it's that SOD, that things that help us mop up our oxidative stress, and that's what makes it so unique. But unfortunately, collagen, it's such a big molecule, you couldn't contain it. There's no way to do something similar. So yeah, I'm sorry to brag. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that take collagen and might be a bit disappointed in what I just had to say. But my advice is eat a well-rounded, plant-forward diet. Make sure you get lots of good protein in, and your body will have everything it needs to make collagen.
Interesting. I did not know that as well. So as far as I want to get to, in particular, how you can help men. And I would love for you, maybe if you can, just maybe share maybe one or two, stories. That way, when the guys hear this, they can maybe be like, well, that sounds like me, and maybe something I'm going through.
Sure. Well, I guess from a body contouring point of view, I shared my personal journey with gynecomastia and that sort of spare tire. We are programmed as men or as women. We have a genetic program that tries to incorporate fat in certain parts of our body, and as guys, it happens around our midsection. And so I've met lots of guys who are very fit and actually are doing the right things, but they're left with this extra tissue that they just can't manage. So those are things that a plastic surgeon could potentially help with. And so if it's something that's bothering you, then it's worth having that conversation. And I think the other population of guys that I tend to see quite a lot of are sort of older professional guys who come to me for facial rejuvenation. And it's funny because, as we talked about earlier, there's almost always that kind of look of shame on their face, like I shouldn't really be here. And I'm like, well like why? And when guys come to me for facial rejuvenation, it very often has something to do with their work or personal life. They're divorced or they've lost their wife and they're looking to move on and start dating again, and they just want to look fresh, or they want to keep their sales numbers up, and they recognize that it's a young person's game. They want to look like they're on top of things. So facial rejuvenation like eyelids and facelifts, very common for guys to have that kind of thing done. And so I would say for anyone out there, the first thing I'd say to any person, you're perfect the way you are. If you're happy and you're content and you're interacting with the world and you're positive about that, that's great. Good for you. That's the way it should be. But if there's something that's on your mind that you're not comfortable about, it's okay to talk to people, and I'm sure that whoever's listening, wherever they are, there's a plastic surgeon near them that they could talk to that would be able to give them counsel on what could or couldn't be done to help achieve those goals, and just make them feel good about how they interact with the world every day.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah. So for anybody who wants to see you, like basically in your office, that would be an option. And then you also have an online service as well, correct?
Yeah, so I'm getting into the sort of holistic longevity part of beauty, and I like to really emphasize the fact that skin is our biggest organ, and it is I think you said earlier, the canary in the coal mine. It is an indicator of your organ and your whole body health. And so good health inside definitely manifests on the surface of your skin. But as I alluded to through our conversation today, there's a lot of things on your skin that actually manifest inside and control your health and your brain function. So there's a two-way street there between how you appear and the health of your skin and the health of your organs and your body. And so I'm really getting more and more into healthy longevity and how that reflects in our appearance. And so the beautyspan.com is my website around that. And BeautySpan is the premise that I'm sort of trying to promote around the idea that your appearance is not just about today, it's a long-term endeavor. And you're going to want to keep it up from day one, just the same as you're going to want to keep up your physical health and your strength. And working on it that way, you're going to look the best that you can, function the best that you can for the longest that you can. And to me, that's healthy longevity. I mean, I think that's a goal that all of us share.
That is so cool. And I noticed on your website, you actually have a CBO, Chief Beauty Span Officer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks. The my chief beauty span officer, as it happens, also doubles as my wife and my
No
practice
way.
manager. Yeah, so that's Stephanie Lusk, and Stephanie, I mean, she's amazing. She has been a huge advance in our practice and how we interact with patients. She herself, she's also plant-based. She's a chef and a recipe creator. So she brings the diet and nutrition part of the healthy longevity to the practice. And so yeah, she's our chief beauty span officer, and really helps patients kind of see that connection between what they eat and how they appear and their health.
That is so cool. And what's so cool about having a practice or a small business like this is we just implemented a CAO, which is a Chief Appreciation Officer. So I love like these terms that we can create when we have small companies like this, and just to make our company function extremely well. I know the guys can find that, like you said, over at beautyspan.com for that type of service. And your office is in Toronto, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I'm in Toronto, and you can find me on Instagram, Dr. Cory Goldberg, MD. Certainly, if you're in the Toronto area or you'd be interested in coming through Toronto, if you hit me up there, you can also find me on my website, corygoldbergmd.com. So certainly happy to see anybody for consultation. I can do telehealth as well for people interested in talking more about the plastic surgery side of things.
So wait, you can actually do telehealth appointments to do plastic surgery consultations?
Yeah, yeah, and
Really?
since the pandemic, that has actually grown quite a lot. I have quite a few people from across Canada and lots of people from the U.S. that will come up and see me in Toronto for surgery. So we have protocols in place to make sure people are well taken care of. Yeah, they show up in Toronto. We do what's necessary, and then we do our follow up, and they head back home, and we take care of them remotely from there.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea that was even that was a thing. That's really convenient.
Yeah, and there's a growing global community of medical tourism, and not all of it good. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of complications that people have had from surgery in Mexico or Eastern Bloc countries, or places where people are looking to get a deal and end up getting harmed, and then they come to the emergency room, and we take care of them. So you got to be really careful about who you sign up for that kind of thing with. But absolutely, it's a safe practice as long as it's done responsibly, and you know who your clinicians are.
Well, yeah, that's kind of scary when you're correcting other people's problems. We've seen that a time or two in the OR as well. It's not a good thing. Well, Dr. Goldberg, thank you so much for coming on today. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot too. This was really in depth, and it was absolute gold. And I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your time. I enjoyed our conversation as well, and I'm confident that some of the things we talked about are really going to help the listeners and look at things in a new and different way for sure. So yeah, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you again.